you're doing well. It is Monday, May 5th, 2025, and welcome to Mind Heart Mondays. I am doing a series for the month of May, one that may be perfect for you if you struggle with anxiety or depression. This is a very common affliction, so I thought since May is Mental Health Awareness Month, this is the perfect series. So tonight, I'm going to introduce us to anxiety and depression. Many of you are very familiar with this. You struggle with it yourself, or you know somebody who struggles. In this particular series, I'm going to get into signs and symptoms, stages, the need to be truthful with myself, and strategies and steps to recovery. By the way, I do have an anxiety class every Wednesday, if that's something you're interested in, where I get into the depths of these topics. And certainly if you're interested in doing one-to-one sessions with me, I would be honored to walk alongside you and help you through your anxiety and depression. For those of you that are new, welcome. I'm glad you're a part of the She's Restored family. I have many goodies for us this year, and they are slowly manifesting. And this month is going to be a great month for us of manifestation. So let's get into this. Anxiety and depression. Now what's interesting about this is usually when you are diagnosed with anxiety, you are also diagnosed with depression. What I tend to teach, however, is that anxiety is more the energy and the force that causes depression, and also anger. So if you're struggling with anxiety, you are also struggling with either a form of depression or a state of depression. Actually, depression is a state, and I'll get into that in a minute. Or you struggle with anger. Because anxiety at its root is an energy. It's a force that is driven by the spirit of fear, and it leads us in a direction. Okay, so this is foundational and paramount for you to understand, because when you get to the roots of anxiety just in and of itself, then it's much easier to combat and to battle. Welcome. Hi, Nick. I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope this series is going to bless you. And as I mentioned earlier, I am a certified therapeutic art life coach, and I do one-to-one sessions. So if you're interested in setting up one-to-one with me, you can email me at she'srestored@gmail.com. Let's see. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so just to kind of get us into the series, I'm going to overview a little bit about anxiety, and then I'm going to get into the signs and the symptoms for this teaching. This is going to be a 4 to 5 week course, probably 4 weeks for us. So I hope you guys tune in every Monday this month. But yeah, let's get into this. So anxiety, as I said, is really, you can look at it as unease. It is an energy of unease, okay? And it comes at me through the spirit of fear, generally speaking, because there is a spirit of fear that harasses us. And then it gets very diabolical and tailored to our own individual fears and anxieties, quote unquote. So it's important to understand it at its root and its foundation, again, so that I can understand it personally for myself. So anxiety leads me in a direction. When I teach on anxiety, I always teach that it is, and you can see this sort of a visual representation of a pendulum that moves either way, okay? So anxiety will either take me, as I say, to the heights of anger or the depths of depression. So in other words, when I'm anxious, I will either be very agitated and outward with my anxiety. That is to say, I project it. I usually get very short-tempered or curt or frustrated, and I just lash out and let it out, usually at other people, which is not nice. Or I will internalize the anxiety and keep it, and it will weigh me down. And this is the state of depression. Now let's go over this for a minute. There are stages to this. So anger is a raw emotion. It is a natural emotion, and it is also one that is very fiery. Okay, so if you're someone who's prone to anger, it's important to know that about yourself so that you can manage when you get upset. And again, usually this comes in the form of anxiety. Now, anger, if I don't deal with my anger, my raw emotion of anger, that is to say, in the present, and usually this would be, you know, in the circumstance of somebody upsets me and I don't deal with it, whether I don't deal with it with the person or I don't deal with it internally, it will go into the next stage, which is resentment. So resentment is anger that has been hibernating. That's the best way to describe that. If I don't deal with resentments, they turn into a state of bitterness, okay? And that's a very dark stage of anger because bitterness will begin to create a hardened heart. And once I get there, it's very hard to allow myself to feel, and therefore I will go into a place of apathy, which is the worst stage you can be when it comes to anger, because apathy is complete disconnection from your emotional realm. So if you struggle with anger, it's important to know you must learn to deal with your anger in the present tense. But if you are somebody who's struggled with it for a long time and you have a lot of resentments, as they say, you can still uproot them, and I'd be happy to help you. Okay, so now, conversely speaking, with depression, depression in its rawest form is the state of sadness, or the emotion of sadness. Again, sadness is a raw and natural emotion. This is why it's very important for us to learn how to express how we feel. For a lot of us, we didn't grow up in homes where that was allowed. And this is why a lot of us are in chronic states of anxiety, believe it or not, because we have been conditioned and have been living in this place of unresolved emotional pain. But depression comes from sadness. So again, if I don't deal with my sadness, if I don't talk about how I feel and I internalize it, it turns into a state of depression. Depression, if you let it go for too long and you don't deal with it, will turn into despair. Okay, and this is where it gets very dangerous, because when I'm in a state of despair, and usually, you know, if I'm the type that's, you know, an introvert, I isolate, I don't really talk to anybody about how I feel. This is where I can get into that dangerous stage of feeling hopeless. And that left unchecked will lead me into despondency, which is complete disassociation. Okay, so as you can hear and see, all of this is very important for us to be in touch with. So the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression and anger, as I just shared, you need to know the states. But what's also important is to know that just as these places of unease in self have stages and states, so does anxiety. In other words, my anxiety can be connected to an event. Let's say I just had a traumatic event happen to me. For example, a car accident, okay? That is something that was unexpected. It caught me off guard. Maybe I got injured in the car accident. Maybe somebody else got injured. Maybe my car's totaled. I mean, the outcome is, limitless, but it is an event that happened to me that caused me a trauma and raised me into a state of anxiety, which is, in essence, it takes me out of my normal homeostasis and puts me in either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Okay, most of us are familiar with fight or flight. That is to say, when I'm anxious, I either flee, which is flight, or I fight. Okay, you can also liken this to the anger and the depression. So when I get anxious, I fight. That's the projection, the anger, and when I get anxious, I internalize, and that's the flee. Okay. There are also two other stages, and that is, or states, I should say, freeze, which is disassociation. That is to say, I freeze. I literally completely disassociate from what just happened to me as a way to protect myself. Or fawn, which is actually engaging to find my peace. Okay, so this is important to know about yourself, and this will also help you to identify when you're in these different stages. So an event, another place of anxiety is a condition. So for those of us that have been diagnosed, quote unquote, with anxiety, or maybe we're taking medication, it is now a condition. It is not just a temporary traumatic moment or event. Okay, so those are the two things to identify. And then the condition in and of itself can be, and of course this can get very detailed, but I'm keeping it general for the sake of class. It can either be acute or chronic. Okay, acute again is a short term but severe enough to be diagnosed, and then chronic is this has been going on for longer than 6 months, let's say. And obviously, for some of us that have lived through domestic violence or any kind of abuse, this would be considered a chronic state because our homeostasis, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, has been completely hijacked because of our environment. So this is important to know for yourself. So let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms, which is what this class is essentially on. And we'll start with, let's start with depression. So believe it or not, depression, though it is typically categorized as feeling sad or disconnected, again, people can demonstrate the opposite in depression, okay? And the reason is because it is connected to anxiety. So you can be depressed and still, exhibit what some would say, a happy face on the outside. Okay, you can still be battling something quietly internally. So some of these symptoms, I suppose, or signs aren't quite as obvious. So that's another thing to remember. This is why a lot of times there have been many stories and unfortunate accounts of relatives or friends of people who have taken their own life because they did not seem like they were depressed. They didn't present themselves in a way that was, struggling or depressed. Okay, because again, depression is very deceptive in that respect. That it is a quiet battle, and a lot of times we may not even realize that we've gone that deep into it. Okay. But some of the symptoms that are obvious are being withdrawn. And these are things that you can sort of assess for yourself, especially if you're trying to figure out, am I depressed? Am I, going through this? But feeling withdrawn, this is a red flag. Withdrawn, this means that I am losing interest in things that matter to me or that bring me joy. And I would say this state of depression, you've probably already kind of moved into a state of despair. Again, this is common if you have been in any kind of mental, emotional, or physical oppression. Okay, so if you're living, let's say, like I said, if you're living in a household that is very toxic, whether it's overtly or not, and you're not able to allow yourself to be in that normal state of homeostasis, it's very natural actually that you would withdraw. So withdraw or being withdrawn. Sorry, y'all, that was my husband. If y'all heard that. Boredom. This might be surprising. Boredom is a symptom of depression. Again, this is connected to the feeling of disconnection to the things that bring me joy, okay, or happiness, depending on how connected you are to your spirit realm. And really, at the root, joy is always freely given to us by the Spirit of God. But happiness is contingent on circumstances. Boredom. So again, boredom is the loss of interest and at its root, it really comes from not being connected with purpose. Okay, that's a whole other teaching, but the more connected I am to who I am and why I'm here, the more animal, I have to say it in Spanish, but the more like, what's the word I'm trying to say? The more drive I have to want to live and to want to, find the purpose in my day. Okay, but a lot of times this can be associated with depression simply because, especially in, I would say, a chronic stage, I've crept into this state of despair and despondency, which again is, leading me further into the depression. Another one, and this is one I would say is it's obvious, and it is very connected to if you are in constant state of anxiety. Again, if you're in an environment that is keeping you in a state of unease at all times, but it is emotional dysregulation. And this is actually for both ends of the spectrum of anxiety. You will have emotional dysregulation. So this can come in the form of crying spells. That is to say, you, at the drop of a hat, you'll start crying. And for some people on the outside, especially if they don't know what's going on with you, or you know, they maybe just don't quite understand the severity of your circumstance, you might start crying about something very, again, from the outside, that it's really, you're crying about that. That's a very, you know, that's a very weird thing to cry about. But it is because you are in this stage of depression. So, and again, remember, everybody releases their anxiety differently. Everybody releases their depression differently. And conversely, some people who aren't as emotionally charged, I guess you could say, may actually come across being very, what's the word, stoic. So maybe in a situation where someone would think, do you not have any emotions? You won't have any emotions, but you're severely depressed. You just don't express it in that way. So again, this is why this is very tricky to diagnose, because there's so many different types of responses to these conditions and these states. But at the root is just emotional dysregulation. So you're either overly emotional or under emotional. And then the obvious one with depression that we obviously want to pay attention to, especially if someone is confiding in us, is any kind of signs of self-harm, or you know, any kind of cues that, you know, they don't want to go to work anymore, they don't want to talk to anybody, you know, those are very important signs to pay attention to. Or if you're in that stage where you're starting to lose interest in your life altogether, this is when you need to reach out for help. And this is certainly, even though it's a very dark stage, it is a stage you can recover from. And if you are here, I welcome you to reach out to me personally. Okay, so that's depression. Now with, as I say, with the anger part of the anxiety, some of the symptoms and signs are agitation, and frustration. Well, it's agitation, but I will get very upset at the smallest thing, especially when I'm in the stage of like overload. Like I'm in a chronic stage of anxiety, or let's say I'm under heightened stress because of my circumstance, you know, life or death situations, all of these sort of heightened and elevated states of anxiety. I'll get agitated for the smallest things. Just like somebody that's battling with depression will maybe just cry out of nowhere. Somebody who struggles on the opposite end, which is the anger, the overt anxiety, they'll get mad about the smallest things. And you'll be like, are you okay? Like, but it's because, again, they're trying to combat this anxiety in their way, which is to do it overtly and to project their agitation and frustration. So those of you who battle with the anger, the heights of anger, you will be very short-tempered in what many would think is not a situation to get so upset about. Also, conditions, and these are sort of secondary conditions, I guess you could say, but conditions like OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. This is it's a disorder, and it's a condition that I want to manage. This is me trying to control my anxiety or control my environment, because I feel the anxiety, I feel the unease, but I will become obsessive over the smallest things to try and bring back that state of peace. And again, this is why a lot of this is I am really crying out for peace that I don't feel in the moment, or in the stage, the state that I'm in, or the season in my life, whatever it is for you. So that's another one, OCD. And then the third one that I'll get into, again, with the emotional dysregulation, is when it comes to anger, is, and this can be equally dangerous as the depression is for those who internalize the battle. This is fits of rage. So if you're finding yourself, flying off the handle, and, whether it's emotionally, verbally, maybe you're being very mean to the people around you. And of course it can get worse and dangerous from there. So, being violent, breaking things, that kind of thing. This is emotional dysregulation and fits of rage. Now, again, y'all, this is not even getting into diagnoses of different kind of disorders, or personality disorders that anyone can have. This is sort of just a generality of it. So just FYI. And obviously, if you are somebody who struggles with anger, it's very important for you to learn how to manage it so that you don't hurt others. In the same way that those who battle with depression, it's important for them to learn so that they don't harm themselves. It's equally important for those who battle with the anger part of anxiety not to hurt others. Okay, so, and then, of course, there is, those who vacillate between anger and depression. So maybe you're listening to this and you say, well, sometimes I get depressed and sometimes I get angry. Then you're probably someone who, again, you go between the two, you're somewhere in the middle. But it is important for you to know this for yourself so that you can learn to manage and eventually conquer this battle with anxiety. Now, anxiety, again, it comes from the spirit of fear. It comes at us at all times, actually, especially the days that we're in, especially if we're going through, again, any kind of life fractures, as I call them, or you're in states of unrest because of your circumstances or living situations. It's very easy to go into these stages. So be aware that, some of this is just a normal response that you have. but it's also within Remedy's reach. And this is why I'm here. This is why I teach what I teach, to equip you and to help you. And this is why I do the one-to-one sessions, which I welcome all of you if you're watching this and you're looking for someone to talk to about your anxiety or depression. I do one-to-one sessions, and this whole year I'm only charging $25 per session to honor the year of 2025. So if you're looking for someone to talk to, and I usually use the modalities of music, art, and movement, because those are my areas of expertise. I'd be happy to walk you through this and help you figure out what it is that is at the root of your anxiety and your depression, because we all have roots to them, and help you find some remedy. So I welcome all of you for that. But that's my teaching for tonight. Next Monday, we'll get into stages a little more detailed and deeply. And again, if y'all are interested in my one-to-one sessions or my group classes, you can go to my channel description and you can find my website and all that information. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope this week is wonderful for you, and I will be back hopefully soon, definitely Friday for our Friday Night Live. But if y'all need me before then, don't hesitate to reach out. she'srestored@gmail.com. And again, my name is Ruby. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you get to a wonderful place of your battle with anxiety. Talk to you soon. Love y'all. Bye.